All right. So thank you very much for joining me today, first of all. My name is Asif Rahmani. I am a SharePoint Server MVP and a Microsoft Certified Trainer. And these webinars, I really love to conduct them. Thank you very much for all of you who have joined repeatedly. I see a lot of people on the attendee list who I've seen before, so thank you very much for those folks. And if it's your first time, thanks again. Thanks also to give us a try. And I hope you're not disappointed. I'll be talking about creating workflows with SharePoint Designer 2010 and also big portions of the integration parts of InfoPath and Visio. In fact, I'm going to be focusing a lot on the integration components of it. So this presentation is not really about just workflows. There's a separate presentation that I've done before within webinar, and I have lots of presentations for workflow specifically on the website SharePointVideos.com. But this one is a lot more about integration points between Visio, InfoPath, and SharePoint Designer workflows. All right. I'm assuming some knowledge already that you have about some of these products, so I'm not going to be going completely beginner level for those things. But I'm hoping that no matter what level you are at, you should be able to get at least some benefit out of this webinar. All right, so let's get started. Let me just give you a brief introduction of myself if this is your first time, especially in one of my webinars. My email address is above, asif@sharepointelearning.com. As I mentioned before, I'm a SharePoint Server MVP and a Microsoft Certified Trainer. And I'm a principal contributor at SharePoint-videos.com. Over there we have videos on all kinds of things with SharePoint, SharePoint Designer, and InfoPath related. We currently have 193 videos out there, and I'm hoping that within this week or next week we're going to break the barrier of 200. So we're going to have more than 200 videos at the end of next week, I'm pretty sure. Also, we're offering remote consulting as well. So if you need remote consulting or one-on-one training, basically, reach out to us. Let us know how we can help you. Oh, here it is. The current video count is 193. And remember, keep in mind that our videos have no code. These are completely no-code videos. That does not make them less powerful, by the way. All the functionality is extremely powerful functionality. It's just without code. There's so much you can do without code. Why really go to it unless you really need to? That's our philosophy, at least. I'm the co-author of the book Professional SharePoint Designer 2007, which came out in 2008. And now, within a few months, we're going to have the beginning SharePoint Designer 2010 book coming out pretty soon, hopefully beginning of October. Also spoke at many conferences, continue to speak at the conferences. If you're coming to the Best Practices Conference or the SharePoint Connections Conference that are coming up, I hope to see you there. Alrighty, let's begin then. What to expect during this presentation? Lots of show and tell, lots of demonstrations. In fact, I don't have any more slides after this one. Actually, yeah, that's not true. I do have slides, but I will not be covering them because I have so much to show you. And I think that's the best way to instruct anyway. That's what my philosophy is in class and everywhere else that I teach. Okay, so I'm going to be showing lots of demos. Questions, no problem. Put your questions out there. I'll try to take some of them right now, actually, right after this slide. And then the remaining of it, I'll try to take in between. Most of it I'll take at the end. All right? So let's see. Let me go into the question panel, see if there's any burning things that you want to talk about right now. Okay. Bill, you're saying you're having issues with audio. I'm really sorry. I'm not sure exactly why this would be the problem with the phone. I would suggest trying to use a click on the use microphone and speaker radio button, and then just plug in a what do you call those headphone basically on the computer. And try listening to that if you don't mind. All right, there's no other questions here, so let me go ahead and begin. Okay, hang on a second here. I'm just bringing up my environment right now, in which I'll be working in. Okay, so pretty soon your screen should refresh and you should see my environment. It should say, well, it's a webinar site. I've created this for you guys, and I'm going to be working in this site, the webinar site, to show you the functionality. All right. Now I'll be talking about, like I said before, SharePoint Designer workflows, InfoPath, and Visio. And basically all that, how it comes together to make an end-to-end solution. All right. The scenario that I'll be working in is going to be a simple, fairly simple expense reimbursement form, and I'll show you how you can make the form in InfoPath and then use different workflow tools to make the workflow, how you can visualize the workflow, how you can change the forms for the workflow, and everything else in between. So let's begin. First thing, I'm going to go to Microsoft Office and go to Microsoft InfoPath Designer 2010. Microsoft InfoPath Designer 2010 is not a free application. You do need to pay for it. It does come with many of the Office suites, Office Ultimate, Office Enterprise, Office Professional Plus. Otherwise, you can purchase it separately. But this is not a free application. Keep that in mind. When it starts up, I'm going to say, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'll first show you how you can start it up to begin with, and I'm going to bring up a form that's already made, because I don't want to spend too much time teaching you InfoPath right now. That's not the intent of this webinar. So I'll click on SharePoint Form Library, click on Design Form, and this is how you start designing a form that you intend to publish to a form library in SharePoint. The reason you publish a form to a form library in SharePoint is because you want your users to fill out that form, and the form itself is going to reside then in the library, very much like a Word document or Excel document or PowerPoint document resides in a library. But this is going to be for form library instead of document library. Okay? And here, you start putting in your information, whatever you want. Controls, you can drag and drop. Well, you can click on the control that you want. Text boxes, combo boxes, check boxes, all the different kind of controls that you would want are right here. All right. There's a lot of depth in InfoPath 2010, a lot. I've been working with InfoPath since 2003, and it's just grown tremendously. It's got some great integration points with SharePoint. Many of them I'm going to cover here. Some of them I will not get a chance to cover here, but we have a lot of InfoPath videos on the site if you're interested. Let me close this form for now. Don't save. And I'm going to go to my webinar folder. Here I have an expense report file. If you double-click on an .xsn file, it's just going to open it up in fill mode, asking you to fill it out. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is open it up in design mode. So instead, you right-click on a XSN file if you have already saved one before. You click on design. Here's my form. Let me walk you through this thing. Simple picture, simple image that I inserted in by going to insert picture right here. Here's a heading, expense report, a couple of subheadings, employee info, expense details. In terms of controls, this little thing over here is a very powerful control. This is a person or group picker control, totally new to InfoPath 2010. And that's right here, person and group picker. That's how I put this control in there. Then you got the regular combo box control. In here I have a few different choices in here. Let me go to Control Tools Properties and show you and edit choices that I have: IT, marketing, sales, 3 different departments. You can also get external data directly into the form as well. So if you have a department table in your database somewhere, for your company, you can go ahead and pull information on your departments directly from there. Or if you might have a SharePoint list that has department information. No problem. Get it from there as well by going to the Get Choices of an External Data Source option right here. I don't want to do that right now, so I'm going to cancel and just keep it the way it is. For phone, I have some validation hooked up on the phone field and email field. So if I click on Manage Rules, it shows me it's going to be looking for the validity of this email. Same thing for phone. And there's a condition here that says, go ahead and match to a pattern. The phone number pattern for this one and the email pattern for this one right here. Okay, these patterns are already built in, so I'm just comparing against those patterns. Good to have. For the expense details, I have item, quantity, price, and subtotal. Item is text field, quantity is number field, price and subtotal, of course, are currency fields. Automatically, the subtotal right now is built, so it's price times quantity. Let me quickly show you how this looks right now. Click on default value, and here we go. It says quantity times price. Okay, and lastly, the final total field shows me the final total of the subtotal. Okay, so this stuff right here is going to get summed up into the final total. And on top of that, you see right here it says for rules, there's a rule. I didn't really name it, it just says rule 1, but it says that if the final total is above $1,000 and if the final total field is not blank, then go ahead and turn this into red formatting. Basically, that's what you want to do. And this is just basically, telling them that that's a lot of money that you're asking for reimbursement. That's basically it. Okay, still it's going to get reimbursed. It's just that we want them to know that you're asking for a lot of money. Okay. All right. What am I doing here? Let's continue. So I have the form. I'm going to go ahead and publish it. Okay, so you have the form. You can go ahead and publish it to SharePoint. First, let me take you to my SharePoint site. Webinar. I'm going to right-click on Webinar here. Copy the shortcut for this location. I could also go here and copy this location. Either way. Back in InfoPath, I'll click on File, Publish. Lots of different places I can publish to. Recommended place is SharePoint Server. So I'll click on SharePoint Server. It says you need to save it first before you go ahead and publish it. That's fine. I'll go ahead and save this form one more time. Let me go ahead and just call it expense report 1 or something. Okay, because it started from a template and it's saying that it's made a copy of the template and now it wants me to change it. No problem. I just went ahead and saved it as a different name. Here I'm going to put in the site that I want to publish the form to. Great. Next, it goes out and looks for that site, sees if it exists. And it does. 3 different ways I can publish the form. I'll be talking about the form library publishing here, but there are videos out on the site which talks about content type and administrator approved form template publishing. Let me just publish it out to form library. So next, do you want to make a new one or update an existing one? I want to make a new one. And the new library is going to be called Expense Reports. Fill out this form to request reimbursement of expenses, of course. Alright. In the Forms options, which are accessible through the File menu right here, I have previously promoted the following fields as columns. Okay, I have the department, email, final total, and the account ID here references this person's account ID. Since it's a person group picker, it shows me, or it could show me, the display name of the person, the account ID of the person, and I chose to take the account ID of the person and promote that property. Now, what does it mean by promote? Well, you got all these different fields that are in InfoPath. When I'm going to publish this whole form to the form library, I can select which fields I want to become columns in the library. Okay, and that's very important, especially for what I'm about to do over here. So I've chosen these 4 fields for that. I click on Next and Publish. This will take just a second here. Or maybe a few seconds. So it's going out and publishing the form on the site. Still going. When it's done, I have a couple of different ways to get to the library. Here we go. I click on Open this form library, click on Close, and it will take me there. The lazy man's way of doing it, I guess. That's what I'm going to do. Or I could have just gone ahead and gone to the webinar site, click on Libraries, and it should be one of the libraries right now. Here it is. It says Expense Reports, one of the libraries. Okay. Let me go ahead and close this tab. Okay, so I have my fields: department, email, final total, and account ID. All of them have become columns now in this library. So anything that I fill out for this form, the information from that form is directly going to go ahead and propagate up over there. And let me show that to you. Okay. So the first step, this was accomplished right now by a form designer. An InfoPath form designer who has a capability goes ahead and designs a form, publishes it out to SharePoint. Now a person can go ahead and fill out the form. This is the end user, the person who's asking for reimbursement. So they can click on Add Document here. And this form is opening up in the browser. I'll talk about that, and actually let me talk about that right now. Opening up a form library form in the browser requires the SharePoint Server Enterprise license. Okay, so if you want it to open up in the browser, it requires the SharePoint Server Enterprise license. What I did before, the InfoPath form creation and publishing to SharePoint, that doesn't require anything except SharePoint Foundation. Okay, so here, if I did not have SharePoint Server Enterprise running, if I had SharePoint Server Standard or SharePoint Foundation running, the two other SKUs that SharePoint provides, then it will try to open it up, this form in InfoPath. If I did not have InfoPath on my client machine, so if I didn't have this thing in my client machine, then just like if you try to open up a Word form, it would give you an error, right? That, hey, I don't have Word on this client machine, so I can't open it up. Just like that, it would give you an error saying that you don't have InfoPath, so you can't open up the InfoPath form on this machine. But like I said, InfoPath does come with many of the Office applications, Office suites that you guys have, so chances are very, very high that you already have it. If it's not on your machine, that means it's just not been installed or deployed to your machine, so you can talk to your administrator about that. All right, so let's assuming here we have SharePoint Server Enterprise license. It opens up in the browser. I'm going to go ahead and fill out some information here. Irene, I'll go ahead and click on this check mark. Here we go. It resolved to Irene Hernandez. It's picking it up from the Active Directory directly because my SharePoint environment, of course, is part of the same domain. For department, here we go, 3 departments. I'll pick marketing. Date, I have it configured, so it's taking today's date, the current time, and populating that, Central Time in this case, and populating that directly in here. Actually, no, not Central, Eastern Time. All right. And I can change that if I wanted to, of course. You can change the date and the time, whatever you want to do. For email, currently says it's not valid. Of course, there's nothing in there. I'll put something in here. Nope, doesn't like it. Gotta be a valid email. So how about, doesn't like that either. All right, how about I use my own email and the correct way of doing it. Okay, good. For phone, once again, phone's gotta be valid. So it's looking for that. Nope, not valid. How about this? Okay, good. For item, let's go ahead and put some items in here. Flight, quantity is going to be 1 or 2, or 1 is good. Price is 300. Subtotal, there we go. Insert item, hotel, 5 nights, $200 a piece. Whoa, it went over $1,000. So it went ahead and changed this to red or pink background and the red font. If I reduce this to 3 nights, much better. Okay? Either case, it will still let me go ahead and save the form because it's just a conditional formatting. It's not really validating the data. It's just formatting the actual data and warning me that, hey, you know, your total has gone over $1,000. Now I'm going to go ahead and save. So I'll click on Save. Asking me for a file name, so I'll provide it a file name. I'll say Irene and save. It still keeps me on this page. I need to click on Close to get out of this page and go back to the library. Do you want to save the changes? I don't think I made any changes, but let me go ahead and say yes for now. Here we go. If you wanted to configure submit functionality, so instead of save, you click on submit, and automatically it goes back to this page, and automatically maybe even it names your form instead of letting the user name it to like Irene or whatever. You can do that as well. That is called configuring the submit functionality. I have those videos for InfoPath 2007, so you can watch those videos on the site for how you can configure submit functionality. I've not gotten a chance to make it for 2010 just yet, but the functionality is almost exactly the same. So if you follow the videos for 2007, it's the same functionality for 2010 for InfoPath. Okay. Here we go. My information is propagated up into columns. Marketing is a department. Email is this. Final total is 900. Account ID is SPEL Irene. SPEL being, of course, a domain. /Irene being the account ID of the person. Well, that's wonderful, right? I have the account ID of the person even though I just gave this person's name. So, you know, every time you submit expenses, you need to have somebody look at those expenses. So when I design my workflow, I'm going to be using this account ID to my benefit. Okay, and I'm going to show you what that means in just a few minutes. All right. So currently I have the form. It's been published here. Everything was working good. I've tested it out that my users will be able to fill out the form. And now I want to automate my process. I want to automate the expense reimbursement approval process. So for that, I have a couple of different choices. I can start making a workflow directly through the browser. You can do that. Actually, I have a few choices. That's one way that I can make a workflow through the browser, but it has some limitations, which you can do. I can go the extreme way. I can go use a Visual Studio to make workflows. You need code, but it's extremely powerful. But once again, it requires code, so I won't be talking about that here. The third way is using SharePoint Designer to make a workflow. Okay, I can go ahead directly to SharePoint Designer and make a workflow there, which is great. It works great. But I'm going to use the fourth option, which is I'm going to use Visio to make the workflow instead to start with. So I'll go to Start, All Programs, Microsoft Office, Microsoft Visio 2010. Has to be 2010. In fact, what I'm about to do right now, this is what a business process analyst would do most probably, or anybody who wants to visualize the workflow before taking it technically into SharePoint Designer. You will start over here to do that. But the caveat here is that you need to have Microsoft Office Visio 2010 Premium. Okay, there's 3 different SKUs I believe for Visio, and the Visio Premium 2010 is the only one that's going to give you the functionality to make your workflows here. All right, so Business Process Analyst comes over here. Right now, it's showing the categories that I can choose from for my for my design that I'm trying to make here. I'll click on Flowchart, and the template that I want within this category is the Microsoft SharePoint Workflow template. So this, what I was saying before, is not there in, let's say, Visio Standard. You have to have Visio Premium for this to be there. Click on Create. Here's my drawing screen, and I have some stencils, some shapes that I have. Here's some quick shapes that's providing me that are coming from the 3 stencils that are out there. Let me click on Terminators first. You need to put a Terminators on your Workflow Designer environment. That's a must. We're making a sequential workflow. That's what you have to make through Visio or through SharePoint Designer. That's the only kind of workflows that these environments can make. And a sequential workflow has a predefined end, has a predefined beginning, and that's why the terminators are so important. Okay, so you have these 2 points over here, and between that, you go ahead and make your workflow. I'll click on Conditions here, and I'll click on Compare. Which one is better over here? So compare. You know what? No, I'll say Compare Document Field. That should be good. Compare Document Field, put that in there. Next thing, well, what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and here, this document field is going to be, it's going to be comparing that if the expenses are above $1,000, right? So we'll double click on this thing and say it over here. If expense is above $1,000. That's my condition. Okay. What is the action? Well, I'll click on Actions over here. My action here is going to be, how about log here? This is good. Log to history list. And then after that, it's going to be, let me put some of these things out there first before I change the wording. Send an email. Okay. And assign a to-do item. So if expense is above $1,000, log something to the history list. I double clicked on it right now, and I'm going to go ahead and change this text over here. And changing this text helps a lot when you're actually configuring this workflow later. You know what to configure it to. How about keep expenses under oops, that's a lot, $1,000. And I'm going to take the same text over here. So this is going to log to the workflow history list of my workflow. Now I want to also have an email get sent out with the same kind of wording to the person who submitted the form. And lastly, regardless of if it's over 1,000 or under 1,000, I still want the approval from a manager. So in here I'm going to say get approval from the person's manager. Okay. So this workflow, I need to go ahead and connect these shapes together for it to really be a valid workflow that Visio can really understand. Now Visio has an internal workflow engine, meaning it really truly understands SharePoint workflows. It knows about the rules. So if you connect something incorrectly, or if you make some mistake, it's going to tell you what the mistake is. Click on connector, connect these two shapes together, connect this shape together. Here we go. Put it right here. Make it look pretty. And lastly, okay. Alright, each shape is connected to the next thing. And now because this is a condition right here, I need to define if the condition is true, what's going to happen. If the condition is false, what's going to happen. So I'll right click on the first branch here and say yes. That means true. Second branch, right click, no, false. Alright. I am done making my workflow. Let me go ahead and check it to make sure it's built properly. I'll click on the process tab, click on check diagram. Alright, this is great. If there were errors, by the way, you would see a task pane that would appear right down here. And in this task pane, it will show you the exact issue that's there and what you need to fix. It's very helpful in that way. Click on OK over here. I'm ready to export this workflow. I can of course go ahead and save it too if I wanted to, but you don't have to save the Visio diagram itself. It is definitely recommended and a best practice that you should save it for later if you need it, you know. So I'm going to just go ahead and click on export right now, and I'll go to the webinar folder, call this expense report workflow. Notice it says it's going to export this workflow as a Visio workflow interchange file, VWI. Alright, that is the format that is understood by Visio and understood by SharePoint Designer both as a valid workflow for SharePoint. Save, done. As you can assume right now, I'm going to go ahead and open up SharePoint Designer. Okay, that's under SharePoint category. SharePoint Designer used to be under Office. That is no longer the case. Now it's under SharePoint category here, or SharePoint group. Okay. Within SharePoint Designer, what I need to do is click on Open Site. You need to open up a site. Instead of typing the whole thing in here, I'm going to go ahead and go to my webinar site. Just right click on the webinar, copy the shortcut for the site itself, which is, you know, the home page basically of the site. And now I'm going to go back to SharePoint Designer, put the address in here, and click on Open. Okay, so it's communicating through the web service to get the webinar site open. And then once it's open, I'll click on Workflows. And I'm going to click on this magical button up here called Import from Visio. Import from Visio. And then Browse. Alrighty. I'm going to go into the webinar folder and look for the expense report workflow, the file that I just exported from Visio. Open it up. Next. Now it's asking me what is going to be the workflow name. I'll go ahead and keep this workflow name, expense report workflow. And by the way, the person who's doing all these steps here in SharePoint Designer, you know, you probably wonder, who is this person? Whose responsibility is it to import the actual workflow? Well, that could be the site administrator. the site designer, a power user, or even a developer would be doing these kind of things, to go ahead and take this into SharePoint Designer and then extend or enhance this workflow with the actual rules and everything else. Okay. And by the way, those of you who do not know, SharePoint Designer 2010 is a free application that you can download right now if you like. Okay, I have two choices: to attach this workflow as directly to a list, or attach it to as a reusable workflow. I have videos out there which talk about how you can make reusable workflows, or how you can attach or import a Visio workflow and attach it as a reusable workflow. So all those things do exist. Currently, I'm going to use the list workflow option. And you can probably guess the expense reports library, the one that I just made using InfoPath, is what I want to attach this workflow to. Click on Finish. And it will come up slowly but surely. So down here it says communicating with web service. So it's getting the information. Here we go. All right. For some reason, and I have not talked to anybody about that yet at the SharePoint Designer or in the SharePoint Designer camp in Redmond, but I will someday when I remember that. Why is it called ID3 all the time? Every time you bring it in, I'm not sure, but it's always called ID3, the step name. And I like to change the step name, so let me go ahead and change that to something else. For example, I can call it I don't know, process expenses. That's going to be my step name. Next thing, you notice over here it's got these nice comments in here now that the business process analyst went ahead and put into the Visio model, right? But these actual actions, conditions, those things are not configured, or they're not defined yet. The parameters for them are not defined. So I got to do that in SharePoint Designer. Let me click on the first field option here. Choose the final total field. The final total field, of course, is the field in my expense reports library that has my final total for the form. So I'm going to say if final total is greater than, then I'll click on value and just type in 1000. Very easy declarative way of making these workflows, making these rules. Log a message. I'll just copy what it said above. So keep expenses under 8,000. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and actually let me go ahead and put the $sign here first, and then I'll go ahead and take this text, copy it to the clipboard so I can use it later in my email. It says then email these users. So I'll click on these users here. Composition window for email pops up. I'll click on the address book icon for two text box. And I'm going to say the person who created the current item being the current form that's going to be filled out, the InfoPath form that's going to be filled out. Go ahead and send the email to that person. Add. Okay, done. Subject is going to be regarding dash. And you know what I'll do is I'll put the title of the actual form right here. So I'll click on ellipses here. Add or change lookup. Look for the title right here. So it's the title of the actual form is going to go here. All right, and the actual body of the email is going to be keep expenses under 1,000. Simple enough. All right, next thing, assign a to-do item to these users. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. So I need to assign a task now, a to-do item, a task, to the person's manager. Click on a to-do item. Next, the to-do item is going to be approve form. Great. Now these users, who's that going to be? I'll click on the workflow lookup for a user. Click on add. All right, so I'm doing actual lookup now. And where do I want to look up the person's manager? Well, that's going to be in Active Directory, right? Active Directory hopefully is going to have the person's manager. And that information gets propagated to the profile database in SharePoint if that's configured properly. So I need to go to the profile database. And that is accessible to the workflow now by going to user profiles. That's wonderful. Data source being user profile, that's brand new in SharePoint Designer 2010, so it's great to have. I'm going to look for this person's manager, bring back the login name for the manager because that's what I need to assign a task to this manager. And now it needs to know who's manager. Tell me how I can find the person whose manager I'm looking for. Well, the account name of this person, I'll click on the FX button here. And now remember there's an account ID in the expense reports library, which showed SPEL \Irene, or whoever the person is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and take that account ID and use that to match it up, okay, to bring back my user profile, the manager for the person. All right, I guess I'm all set over here. I'll click on OK, and I'll click on OK over here, where I believe we're all set. So our workflow is ready. I'll click on Workflow Settings button, say that let's start this workflow when a new item is created in the library, and that's going to be the expense reports library, and then click on Publish. It's going to validate the workflow. It's going to make the forms that are necessary to be made, which are right down here, and it will go ahead and associate it. Wonderful, it's done. I'll go back out to my webinar site, which is missing an action. Let me go ahead and go to that site. Here it is. Expense reports library. Add a new document. Okay, so the expense report is being filled out by who? Let's say Brian. Brian Cutler. Department, marketing. Phone, doesn't really matter. All these things are just formality right now, but these are required fields, so I need to put something in there. Okay. All right. Item here, of course, this should be a valid email, by the way, but it's okay for right now. Item here is going to be flight once again, quantity 1. Flight was really expensive, so 400 bucks, not 40, but 400 bucks. And then the actual training cost, 1 item, and that was $2,000. Ooh, expensive. All right. So yeah, it's about 2,400, but that's what it was. So this is what it needs to be done. I'm going to go ahead and save this form, or Brian is going to go ahead and save this form. I didn't log in as Brian, but of course you would be logged in as Brian. Regardless, I'm going to be looking to this field for my workflow anyway. So I'll save, call this form Brian, save it, close. Okay, my expense report workflow is in progress. Click on this. All right, check this out. First thing it says, well, my email cannot be sent because I don't have Exchange running here. But the log did happen. It says keep expenses under 1,000. That's good because it was over 1,000. And it assigned the task to Irene Hernandez. I'll go to the task list, and I'll click on the approve form for Irene Hernandez. And here's a form. Okay, so here's the form that Irene gets right now, and she needs to use this form, which I'm going to show, by the way, how to enhance. That's going to be the next thing. But right now she's going to use this form to go ahead and complete the task. Okay, going back to expense reports. And here we go. Expense report workflow is completed. All done. Okay, so like I said, that form that we just saw, we can enhance that, and that's the second touch point that we have with InfoPath. The first one was making the actual form for the form library, pushing it out. Next touch point over here is going to be taking the workflow form and customizing that workflow form. So I'm going to go to the SharePoint Designer environment. Within SharePoint Designer for this workflow, here are my forms. You can customize these forms as long as you have SharePoint Standard or SharePoint Enterprise. So SharePoint Standard is the minimum for you to customize these forms, and of course you need to have InfoPath Form Designer in your environment, on your machine as well, to be able to do that. So I'm simply going to go ahead and click on the approve form.xsn file here. It's going to go ahead and open it up in InfoPath. Not this form that you're looking at right now. It's going to be a new one, because the one that you're looking at right now is my old expense report form that I made before. Still downloading stuff. Here we go. Here's my little inky-dinky small form with not a lot of power here. I can change stuff around, change the title, whatever if I wanted to. Go up. Let me go ahead and quickly go to Insert, Picture, and insert a picture just like you would do in, let's say, a Word document. Okay. Here I can say that please approve the expense. Complete task. Let me go ahead and change the wording for this complete task button. I'll click on Properties, change the label here to approve. How about that? That's what he's really doing, or she's doing. Okay, so I'm done enhancing my form. Of course, could be a lot of enhancements that you can do in InfoPath, from data validation to conditional formatting to doing lookups for other information from outside. You can do lots of cool things because you can modify the form in InfoPath. A question that might come into mind is that what if I don't have SharePoint Server Standard or Enterprise? Then can I still modify my form? The answer is yes. You can still modify your workflow form, but you would have to do it in SharePoint Designer because then it's going to be an ASP.NET form. Okay, so you can still do that. Let me go ahead and publish this out. File, Info, Quick Publish. It says you want to go ahead and save it first here, so sure, I'll go ahead and save it as something. Doesn't matter. Okay, and so now it's pushing it back out to the workflow. Should just take a few seconds here. I got about 6 or 7 minutes more of a demo, and then we'll go ahead and jump into some questions. Okay, done here. That means I'm going to go back to my workflow. What I would, of course, do is repeat the whole scenario again, which is, actually, let me go ahead and do that. Why not do that? Add document. Let's just quickly over here, let's make it Brian again. Phone number, put some phone number in there because it is a required field. We must do it. Okay, final total. Now, you're not supposed to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. I'm going to go ahead and fill out the final total directly. You can make it, by the way, so this field is read-only, so I cannot do this. Here's what not to do. Put it in demo world. It's okay. Let me save. Call this Brian 2. Close. All right, here's my workflow in progress. Click on In Progress. Irene once again has the task. Click on Tasks List. And to see my InfoPath form that I've just modified, I can click on the Approve form for this task, and here you go. My modifications that I made to InfoPath are right here. Approve button, my text, picture, everything. Okay, all been saved to the site now. And also it says this workflow applies to, and here it has a direct link. Oh, you can't see that anymore. It has a direct link, as it shows you in the status bar, to the InfoPath form that was filled out by Brian. All right, click on Approve, get it over with. Click on Expense Reports, and it's done. One more thing now. You can also visualize your workflow using Visio services. So visualizing your workflow while it's running, it's a very simple process to get set up. As long as you have Visio services running, which, by the way, requires the SharePoint Server Enterprise license. You need to have SharePoint Server Enterprise license to have Visio services. As long as you have that, through SharePoint Designer, and of course Visio services is running, you go to the workflow page, workflow settings page, and click on the Show Workflow Visualization on Status page, and then republish your workflow. So now, look, it says generating workflow visualization, all through Visio stuff, Visio services. And I'm going to show you what that means in just a second. All right. Done. I'll click on Add Document one last time in Expense Reports library. Once again, we'll use Brian because we love Brian. Phone number. Email. Great. Something. Final total. Once again, I'm going to cheat over here and say $500, or actually let's make it $1,500. Make it more interesting. All right. So all this stuff has happened. I'll click on Save. Brian has his third form. Close this form. Alright, let's see what happens. So here's my workflow in progress. I'll click on in progress and check this out. It's going to show the visualization using Visio services right here. This is using Silverlight to make this happen. Do you require Silverlight to make this happen? No. It's just smoother, better performance, and better looking with Silverlight. It's just, if you don't have Silverlight installed, it's going to tell you don't have it installed, and it's going to show you the rendering of this in HTML. Okay? But it says right here that this first thing is done, the second thing is done, third thing is done, and right now it's right here. Getting approval from the workflow manager, and that's what this icon right here means. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and one last time, go to task list, go to the approval form, approve the form rather quickly, come back to expense reports, and I'm just going to dive back into the workflow status screen, which says completed now. And here we go, it has changed now to the check mark because it's done. So it can show you exactly with a complicated workflow where you are in your workflow at a certain time. That's all driven by Visio. Okay, you can click on also open in Visio, and it's going to give you a snapshot of this whole thing just like that in Visio. Let me go ahead and do that. So it should, and this sometimes takes, okay, I thought it was going to be really quickly, but yeah, this takes time sometimes. So it downloads it from the server, brings it to your client machine, and gives you a diagram, the whole thing, okay, in your environment. It's going to come up pretty soon here. Once it does, you can go ahead and print it out if you want, and you can show that here's how the workflow looks right now. Here's what's going on, the workflow status. Extremely helpful. Still going. I'll keep faith that it's going to come up. I've noticed that the first time I do it, it takes a little bit longer, but then after that, it's faster the second time around, within the same day. And that's, I believe, because of the Visio services, the components, the class libraries, being stimulated here for the first time today. Let me check out the questions and answer panel by, until this comes up here. Okay, lots of good questions here. Good stuff. All right, I'll get to the questions in just a minute. Here we go. Okay, so it shows me the rendering over here. And I can go ahead and print this out, like I said. So now I have my workflow, directly into Visio. And this doesn't, you don't have to really start from Visio, making your workflow and everything else to get this visualization. Even if you started your workflow directly in SharePoint Designer, or even if it's a out-of-the-box workflow, you can still get the visualization for the workflow, just like that. Alrighty, let me go ahead and go back over here to my PowerPoint, and I'll take your questions. Let me go ahead and put this information up here. By the way, here's something else that I want to show you. This might be helpful to you. I've made, of course, dozens and dozens of videos, and actually some of the videos have gotten acquired by Microsoft as well. So if you want, here's a way you can watch the video for free. You can go to TechNet, technet.microsoft.com. All right, go to technet.microsoft.com, and yeah, there's also actually a podcast that I've done recently. They put that out there as well. So a podcast, SharePoint Workflows with Asif Rahmani. This is just talking about workflows in general. You might want to listen to this thing on the TechNet homepage. And the Workflow Resource Center, which is right here. Any of these links will take you to the Workflow Resource Center. This will show you, here I am, by the way, in case I've not met you before. Here's me. And at the bottom here, here's a video on end-to-end process using InfoPath, Visio, and SharePoint Designer 2010 workflow. So that's a video that I've created. And there's actually links to many more, a few more videos out there that I have available for free on TechNet. So you can watch those. You can even download those. I hope you enjoy them. Some of them are beta videos because they acquired them a long time ago, but I'm updating them right now into RTM. Actually, I've already updated it. On the site, it's all updated. Here, there are some beta videos. Functionality is almost the same, though. All right, so technet.microsoft.com. From the home page, you can click on the Workflows Resource Center, and you can go from there. Let me take your questions. Questions you guys have about 10 minutes, let's say. All right. Anas, your question, are things related to delegations issues when defining assigning to-do item can be considered here? Are things related to delegation issues? I'm not sure exactly what you mean, Anas, over here. Delegation issues. So if you've delegated to somebody, I guess is what you're saying, in the workflow, then the assigned to-do item does not automatically go to the person who you delegated to. No, it doesn't work that way. You need to handle that within the workflow. You need to see exactly if the person is not available, go ahead and assign to somebody else, delegate to somebody else, and then assign the person that the task. Lori, your question is, can a form created in InfoPath 2007 or even 2003 be published to SharePoint 2010 and used within a workflow? Not to my knowledge. InfoPath 2007, I have seen people do it. I've not seen anybody do it successfully yet. If you haven't successfully, let me know. But my understanding currently still is that you need InfoPath 2010 to be able to publish to SharePoint 2010. That might have changed recently, but I don't think so. If you've done it, let me know. There's definitely a lot of incompatibilities between InfoPath 2010 and InfoPath 2007. InfoPath 2010 will consume an InfoPath 2007 form, convert it as necessary, and then you can publish that form to SharePoint 2010. So that will work just fine. Can InfoPath forms be used for surveys? Bill is asking, do you have any videos of this? Oh, no, Bill, we don't have any videos for InfoPath being used as surveys. Can they be used for surveys? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that would be wonderful to be able to use InfoPath for surveys. I have seen it done. I have not done it myself, to be honest. I've not had the need yet, but you definitely can do it. And InfoPath-driven surveys are going to be much more powerful, for the most part, than the SharePoint survey list. So definitely that's a possibility. Surya, your question, can that be a SharePoint group with approval rights? Okay, so I think you're talking about the scenario within that. Can you assign a SharePoint group with approval rights? You can, absolutely. You could do that. You can assign it to a group instead of just one person, and then anybody within that group can go ahead and complete the task. Absolutely, you could do that. Rachna, you're asking, can we get the information like name, department, phone from expense report form to the workflow form? And that's exactly what we did in the demonstration. So that's absolutely possible, yes. And I've shown you how to do it. Okay, Paul, your question, can you access a SQL database to retrieve information? Yes, you can definitely access information from a SQL database. You can go ahead and do that from the InfoPath form. Okay, I have videos showing you how to do that as well on the SharePointVideos.com site. So you can do that, no problem. And then once you have the information, you can go ahead and propagate that information into a column in the form library, and then you can use that information in your workflow. So that's information coming from the database, being utilized in the workflow. It works wonderfully. Teresa, your question, can you customize out-of-the-box workflows? Absolutely. There's something called a task process designer, which lets you get into the task processes that are already out there for approval workflow, for collect feedback workflow, collect signatures workflow. Those workflows are available as globally reusable workflows. I do have a video on that as well, of how you can do that. There's a lot of complexity in those workflows, so I just go ahead and show you the different things that are out there and what you can do, how you can customize the emails that are being sent, which are already configured, how you can take a different path if a task gets denied or something like that. So definitely you can do that, customizing out-of-the-box workflows. Don, your question, can you control field level security on a form once it enters a workflow? Ooh, That's a hard one. Can you control field level security on a form? On the form itself, you can hide fields. You can make them unavailable to persons depending on their credentials, depending on their group affiliations. Absolutely, you can do that. But once it enters a workflow, no, not really. I mean, when the field is in the workflow itself, the workflow context is the one that's handling it. The person who is running the workflow, the person who is filled out the form, it runs under their context. So if they don't have permissions to do something, then the workflow itself will not be able to do it either. Now, having said that, there's also something called an impersonation step. Impersonation step. And there's a video about that as well, I believe, or something related to that. And if you put an impersonation step in the workflow, it's going to impersonate the person who made the workflow, who created the workflow, and run the actions using that person's authority. Okay, so you can go around that way. Lavender, your question: can you publish a form that is built on InfoPath 2010 into SharePoint 2007? That I am 100% sure you can do that. You can publish a form that is built in InfoPath 2010 to SharePoint 2007, because InfoPath 2010 will let you create forms or save forms as InfoPath 2007 based forms. So definitely you can do that. Of course, you cannot utilize the functionality that's available in InfoPath 2010. I mean, some of the functionality like the person group picker or the combo box. The combo box was not supported to be viewed in Forms server of SharePoint 2007. So some of the stuff like that is not going to be supported, but yes, you can do that. Carlos' question is, could you mention a little on Visual Studio workflows and when and why we should use those? Also, when do we know we need a Visual Studio workflow? So basically, when should you use a Visual Studio workflow? Well, there's a few things. If you're familiar with state machine workflows, in which you flip the state, basically you're going from state to state to state, and the workflow might never end, and it's just an ongoing process instead of having a beginning and a predefined end, then you need to go Visual Studio, because state machine workflows are not supported by SharePoint Designer or Visio. Another reason would be that looping mechanism, being able to loop or iterate through items. I'm sure many of you know about this limitation. SharePoint Designer is capable of doing it. If you make your own looping or loop actions, you can make your own actions using Visual Studio and then put them into SharePoint, and SharePoint Designer will see it. But there's no activity like that out of the box that you will get to be able to do looping. Okay, so that's a couple of different scenarios where you want to go to Visual Studio. And of course, the third scenario would be that if you have a lot of time in your hands and you just really want to code, then you go to Visual Studio as well. My preference is to go to SharePoint Designer first, and if I can't do it, then I get somebody else to do the Visual Studio stuff. I used to do Visual Studio stuff a lot before as a programmer, about 4 years ago, but I don't do it anymore. All right, Lionel, your question over here is, does sequential workflow support loop back to a node where you come from? So sequential workflows, of course, are beginning to end basically. Can you go back to a node in the beginning? Unfortunately, no. You cannot just say, hey, go to step 1 or go to step 2 or whatever. You can't do that. You can do some tricky things here and there to make something like that happen, but no, it's not supported out of the box, and it's actually not very performant either when you do it this way. So some of that stuff you want to go to Visual Studio for. All right, Paul, your question, doesn't InfoPath 2010 come with a player so that someone without InfoPath Designer on their computer could interact with forms? Okay, that's a very good question. So it's not really a player. It's called a filler, InfoPath filler application. InfoPath Designer, InfoPath Filler, they're two applications, but they're really the same SKU, and you get both of them at the same time when you pay for it. It is possible that you can install only the InfoPath Filler onto people's machines who are not supposed to be designing forms. So yes, absolutely, you can use that to have them fill out the form using InfoPath Filler, and then you don't need the SharePoint Server Enterprise license. Good point, Paul. Okay, different Paul this time. Got a question. Oh, just saying great session. Thank you. Okay, Brandon, let's take a few more minutes for this, and then I gotta go as well. Brandon, how about a rejection process? manager declines a request, or how about a multi-pronged workflow with no or yes as only answer but multiple paths? Yeah, Brendan, of course, in the real world example, you would definitely do that. But if I were to do that in here in my webinar, this would take me a couple hours to build all that stuff. So you could definitely do that, of course, but not in demo mode. It will take a long time. How can you print the workflow details from SharePoint Designer? That's what Kate is asking. Well, Kate, you can just click on the the print button basically, or screen capture, and you can print it out from SharePoint Designer. Or you can take the SharePoint Designer workflow, and there's a button to export that workflow to Visio. Then you can go to Visio, print it out from there. That's probably more better to look at, is better visuals. But if you want to see the actual configurations, the actual inner workings of the workflow, then yeah, you want to just click on the print screen button on SharePoint Designer. There's no real print option for printing small portions of SharePoint Designer, so you just got to print the whole screen. Lori, your question: how did you add the yes/no condition option to the Visio workflow again? Yes/no. Oh, the yes/no condition. So when you have the compare data source that I put in there, the compare object basically, and then I made a branch from that going to two different objects, right? Two different branches. You right-click on the branch. You right-click on the branch, and it shows you the yes and the no option, both of them. All right, Dennis, your question: how did you save Visio workflow to the WDI file type? Oh, it was not WDI. It was the VWI file type. VWI is Visio Workflow Interchange, and you do that by going to the Process tab. If you don't have the Process tab, that means you're not running Visio Premium 2010. So you got to be running Visio Premium 2010 first. You go to Process tab, click on Export, and you export from there. All right. Les, your question: how does SharePoint handle promoting the item, quantity, price columns from the form? Can you still group by these or the forms? Yeah, so if you have repeated columns like the item, quantity, they were all in the repeated table, it can show you the first item of the repeated table, it can show you the last item of the repeated table, it can show you a summary, like a sum of it or a count of it, but it won't show you every single value from the repeating table. So that is definitely a limitation of what you can do with the repeating table and promoting those properties into the column. Tom, your question: how does your video relate to Office 2011? Office 2011. Do you mean Office 2010, Tom? Because we're using, of course, Office 2010 stuff here. I think that's what you mean. That's what we're using here. Peggy, your question: how is the deploying of a workflow? How is the deploying of a workflow in SharePoint 2010? So how does that work basically? When you have a SharePoint Designer workflow, you can deploy directly to a site. Okay, you can deploy directly to a test site, maybe deploy directly to a production site. Yes, I've said it. You can go ahead and deploy directly to production site. That's what's supposed to be done over here. Of course, you should be careful before deploying it like that. I have videos out there which tell you how you can package workflows as well. You can package workflow and then you can deploy that as a solution. So you can do that as well. Reusable workflows will let you package them. You can deploy it to a different site collection, to a different farm altogether, to a different environment, or you can package it and give it to a developer and they can open up the workflow in Visual Studio. Lots of cool things you can do by packaging a workflow. And I have some of these scenarios in video format on SharePointVideos.com. All right, next question. Jesselyn, I noticed you used AdventureWorks stuff for Microsoft. Where did you download? Are there any gotchas in installing? It's a very simple download actually. Yeah, and Microsoft gives you the AdventureWorks database, analysis server database, relational database, everything, and it has a lot of different data in there. And me being a trainer, being a presenter, being a demo kind of guy, and of course in my actual implementation also, when I implement it for clients, I can show them also before implementing something. So this sample data comes in handy. Just do a search for AdventureWorks database. You can do a search for that on codeplex.com, codeplex.com, and you can find how you can download it from there. Very simple install. It's not difficult at all as long as you have SQL Server. Richard, your question: I'm new to InfoPath. Can the elements on the form be included in SharePoint list? Can the elements on the form be included in SharePoint list? Well, so that's what we did. We included it in a form library. There's another way that you can take a SharePoint list and the elements or the columns or the metadata, whatever you want to call it, on the actual list, you can show them in an InfoPath form because you can modify the list form using InfoPath. And I have videos on how you can do that as well on the site. I did not show you that scenario here because that was not our focus. But your question, it is if it's possible to use SQL to create a column based on the form, is it also possible to add from other line of business applications like CRM, SAP? You can definitely do that. You can definitely connect to different line of business applications using InfoPath. Recommendation is that you use web services to do that. InfoPath supports web services. You can use that to tap into any of your line of business application data, bring in the information, populate it into a field, and then once you promote that field, then the information goes along with it to the InfoPath form or to the form library. So you can definitely do that. Darcy, your question, if you're on the outside client coming into the site, if you're on the outside. So I guess that's all it says. If you're on the outside client basically coming into the site, I guess you're asking about InfoPath, how does that work? Well, they will of course need to have permissions to InfoPath, to your SharePoint server. As long as they have permissions, they can come in and get to it. So your form could be on an extranet basically, or it could be on internet, but they would have to have some kind of privilege to get in and get into the site basically. And licensing for that is very different. The internet licensing is a lot more expensive than intranet licensing for form server, for SharePoint Server Enterprise. Okay. Let's see. Ghassan, your question, is it migratable across development to production? Yes. Development to acceptance to production, yes. Like I was saying before, you can package your workflows and that will go ahead and then you can deploy the workflow at a different place. Okay, I'm going to take a couple more questions, guys, and I got to go. It's already almost 4:10 p.m. Eastern. So is it possible for the workflow email feature to allow the recipient to reply from mobile view? Workflow email feature to reply from mobile view. Yes, you can do that because mobile view will show you your task list. And as long as you can get to a task list, you can go ahead and reply to a task. So you can definitely do that. Okay, but you still need to log into your SharePoint account. Yeah, that you still need to do, Heather. Monica, last question here. Is it possible to remove the validation pop-up message that appear on the InfoPath form? Yes, the validation pop-up messages that appeared were configured in my form, but you can remove them. You go to the Manage Rules task pane in the InfoPath form, and you can just take it out from there for each field. All right, folks, like I said, there's information on the TechNet site. There's information on SharePointVideos.com. As I've said before, if you need, we provide SharePoint remote consulting and remote training as well. So if you need help, let us know how we can help you. Take care. Have a great night. Hopefully talk to you next time. And please fill out the survey if you get a chance. Appreciate it. Thank you.